see. Something is going to happen. Something wonderful.
My God, it's full of stars.
Hey everyone, welcome to the NY Patriot Show. Today I'm very excited to have on John Bryson. I've had him on, you've been on twice? I know you've been
twice, yeah.
Yeah, I think you've been on twice here. Have you been on the Occult Rejects? I'm sorry, it's been so long.
Once, yes, I think.
All right, so he's been on a few of our shows. Always a pleasure to have on, and whenever I have him on, if I'm having him on for a topic, I know that the guy knows probably way too much anyway. You know what I'm saying? Like, yeah, if I'm bringing him on for the topic, it's because he has extensive research on it, and I love hearing all of it. So I can't be more excited to have him on. And John, if you want, just let everybody know where they can find your stuff and your own stuff.
Yeah, you can find me, We've_read on Twitter. We've read the documents on Odyssey. And my Substack, just type in We've Read the Documents. I'm currently writing a book on the Finders. I've been investigating the Finders operation for more than 4 or 5 years at this point. And I brought forth documents that nobody has brought forth. I do want to give a shout out to Derek Brose. He did a lot of good research on the Finders operation as well and put out a excellent documentary. He will find what the Finders hide. And also interviewed Robert Gardner Terrell Jr., Toby Terrell, twice. And so I want to thank him for all his work that he's done investigating the Finders as well.
Oh, nice. Yeah. So yeah, I have you on for the Finders, and you know, like I was talking to you before when I was covering the Finders with the Occult Rejects. There was just, I don't know what it was. I guess maybe it's just me. Sometimes when like I'll come across little names here and there, I'll be like, well, wait, you never went back to that person, even though it may not have seemed like it was that important. And there was Reverend Jim Weicker and Carl Shapley that I remember were just like mentioned about like where they were going and people that they were associated with, but like then just nothing else again. And I had that in the back of my mind, and I wanted to just recheck them as we were going along in the series. And I started to look into them, and I was like, this is pretty interesting. And then, like I said, I ended up coming across something that you had posted, and I was like, damn, like you and only one other source that I had actually seen. I'm sure maybe there's others, but no one that
it was primarily only me and Joel.
Well, I don't want to sound like I'm bragging, but I really only think it was just you and George that ever mentioned Carl Shapley before.
Yeah.
And I was like, I'm like, this dude has like some really interesting, even Jim Weicker or his wife. Very interesting people.
Well, I mean, I learned stuff from Weicker that I didn't even know that I got to add to my book, and I'm actually going to, I'm going to give you credit for it, obviously, that I didn't even know. You would give me some background because it's impossible to research everything, right? So the background on the Weickers themselves, you had mentioned stuff in the excellent podcast series that you did in the Occult Rejects that I myself didn't even know.
Wow.
So a lot of it was some of the some of the background on the Weickers that I couldn't find myself. About Weicker, about the New Hope community that they were building. I found this, interestingly enough, let me see if I can bring it up real quick. I found when I was researching Mildred Loomis in the School of the Living, Jim Weicker was associated with the School of the Living and was a member of Ralph Brody's group for decades. And I had found the groundbreaking ceremony for the New Hope community, an actual itinerary where Marion Petty was the last speaker. It was what they call the past, present, and future of the School of the Living, which was supposed to move to New Hope, but never happened. And it says Marion Petty speaks at 1:30 with creative decision making with Jim Weicker, co-coordinator of the School of the Living New Hope project with Marion Petty, which Marion Petty's speech was titled, with Jim Weicker, The Past, Present, and the Future. And it says Marion Petty Finders, Washington, D.C. on the itinerary with discussing the School of Living and the future of the proposed New Hope community that never, now this is before the 1987 Tallahassee incident, obviously, but, so that never came into fruition. But, this was something that had been planning for almost more than a decade.
And what was that again? Sorry to ask you, but was it like a retirement home? Like, what was that whole New Hope thing again?
Well, that's what they claimed in the papers, right? But if it was where the School of Living was supposed to be kind of to be moved to, the School of the Living was kind of like a off-grid communitarian.
So like one of those pod schools,
counterculture kind of like group, right? People living off the grid, so it's like a commune. And so that's what was supposed to be there with New Hope, was a School of Living was going to move from New York to Weicker. It was supposed to be like a combination of all that, which was what New Hope was supposed to be. And New Hope, if I remember correctly, was around Berea, Kentucky, and it never happened.
Yeah, that's where they said they were heading to too. Also, right, Berea, Kentucky.
That is correct. Yes, in January, the Finders Operation visited Weicker, which I also found too that appeared that Toby Terrell may or may have not have been the bookkeeper for Weicker, and may or not have been the bookkeeper for New Hope, because we have to remember that after Toby Terrell, which I haven't been able to find a lot of his parents. If you could help me with that, I'd be very interested to see if I can, because I'm having, and even George and I we're striking nothing.
Oh, okay.
But outside of what Toby wrote in the book The Game Caller about the Finders, right? But I found his college yearbooks. He graduated out of Florida and immediately went to go work almost for the United States Internal Revenue Service. And so he learned a lot about finance, learned a lot about bookkeeping for his time that he worked for the IRS before he moved on to the Finders Operation. Sometime during the
Isabella Petty
60s,
work for
early
them
70s.
too? Sorry to interrupt you. Didn't Isabella Petty also work for the IRS too?
No, she worked for the CIA.
Oh, okay. All right.
She was a secretary for the CIA.
All right. I thought there was somebody with the name of Petty that came up as being associated with the IRS and the FBI.
To my knowledge, no. But
Okay.
but Terrell did work for the IRS.
Oh, wow.
And he
maybe it's him.
he was a bookkeeper for the New Hope Project too as well, which I believe, and I wrote about it in my blog, that a lot, the New Hope community and where the School of Living was moved to, that was being funded by the Finders to some degree, to some capacity. So,
yeah, I think because the way it sounded like to me, I thought they were like going or trying to build really a commune. And didn't they already have one too? Technically, was
multiple
that in Virginia?
Well,
I thought they had like another site somewhere after they raided the warehouse. They did go to like something that was like a commune type, right?
Well, they went down to Florida. There's multiple places where they had these setups.
Or did Weicker maybe own property? Or for some reason, I'm thinking that one of them already had property that was almost like kind of already good to go for a cult.
That might have been something that I don't know. Okay. I'd love to see that, because I do know that I do know that New Hope was abandoned after the 1987 Tallahassee incident, and ended up not being turned into anything. In Berea, Kentucky, the land for that. The School of Living did not move there. There were numerous, my belief about the Finders, one of the main objectives of the group was to be a steering mechanism for the United States Central Intelligence Agency or the United States government or the elite to kind of manipulate the counterculture movement, which I think was probably AstroTurf from the very beginning, right? But it was to destroy any type of grassroots counterculture movement, or any questioning of the government or anything like that, or living off the land, into whatever they wanted it to be, right? I don't know if you look at it the same way, but that's
no. And I definitely agree. I think it's the CIA does that a lot. Exactly what you just said. You know, like has repeatedly tried to. It's hard to explain, but I do think like kind of like hippie or a certain like liberalism, I think is like unnaturally made up for people to run with. It's hard to explain what I'm getting at.
Well, I mean, it's the Tea Party was founded by the Council for National Policy, Mark Meckler and Ginny Beth Martin, the Tea Party Patriots. So you know, I mean, they got to come in on the right or left of both angles, you know. But it's interesting that the left tries to signal in a lot of ways, the progressive movement tries to signal that they're like anti-establishment, right? Well, I mean, at least back then, not now. It's kind of flipped a little bit, but you know, it's just, but yeah, there's a lot of infiltration back then, you know, with the counterculture movement, and a lot of it was done by, you know, Marion Petty had a hand in a lot of it, and he was doing it at the behest of the Central Intelligence Agency.
Now, what do you think was like, so, because I have another question too. So like, what do you think Jim, like, why was Jim even involved? Like, what do you think he was like gaining out of it, or his part? Or you think he was part of just like working with the CIA? Do you think he was just kind of like weird and just associated with this cult and thinking he was, you know what I'm saying? Like,
I don't know if Jim I don't know if Jim was a useful idiot.
Yes.
He just wanted money and fame,
yeah.
Or if he genuinely believed in, because it's interesting, like he's supposedly a Protestant minister, right? But he's not actually. When you listen to anything that is, you know, he's put forth, he's more of a Unitarian Universalist, or even a cultist in a lot of ways. But he's masquerading as a Protestant minister, you know. So there's that kind of like that aspect too, right? And he's a Christian that immediately throws off red flags. I'm like, wait a minute, these two don't go together, you know. So you know, he's acting like he's a, you know, the way they try to frame him, even in the news articles, is he's like a Protestant minister, right? Like he's Reverend Jim Weicker, right? But then, you know, when you see what he's involved with the School of the Living and you see what he's involved with the Finders, it's like, well, no, wait a minute. No, he's like a communitarian, Unitarian Universalist, you know? So, I mean, there's that aspect as well, you know? So with Weicker, I'll give him a little bit of the benefit of the doubt unless you got anything otherwise. I'll definitely take an eye.
No, that's why I was asking you, because honestly, I found his wife, I thought, was maybe a little bit more interesting in herself. Because
true, yes. With what you with her infiltrating,
she was everywhere.
Bible
groups,
lady
was all over the place, right?
Yeah, I know, it was crazy, and that's why I was, you know, I was excited because I had never came across that myself. You know, I never actually looked at his wife. I just had paid attention to him. And Miss Weicker, like you had mentioned, like when you were talking, you know, guys talked about in the podcast, it was like,
she was even mentioned in like Eleanor Roosevelt's diaries.
Yeah, it was just weird stuff, like everywhere, you know, for someone I've never even heard of, you know, like, I mean, I never heard of the Reverend Jim Weicker before I started looking into the Finders, right? But like his wife, on the other hand, you thought I would have, right? Or somewhere around the line, but no, you know, so that's very odd. If anybody was connected to the government, I would say more her than it would be him.
That's what I was wondering too. Yeah, I think that it's a very interesting dynamic, that couple. I think.
Yeah,
because like the one who's like directly tied, or like the face directly tied to being associated with the Finders, is not as interesting as the person who isn't, that he's married to. You know,
that's true. Yeah, it seemed like Jim Weicker was actually kind of boring and just, you know, seemed. I mean, for all I know, maybe he did believe in his communitarian, you know, kind of new age, you know, universal Unitarian beliefs. Maybe, you know, I mean, I think Marion Petty kind of tried to do an inverse Paul, you know, where the Apostle Paul was, you know, Gentiles to the Gentiles and a Jew to the Jew, right? But with Marion Petty, it was like, I'll be anybody, anything, anyone anybody wants me to be, as long as I achieve what I want, which is a very kind of LaVey Satanist type outlook on life, you know? So my guess is that, you know, Petty was nefarious, obviously. Weicker, I mean, he could have been. I don't have any evidence that he was. His wife's a little bit more suspect. But I think Weicker probably either just wanted money, fame, recognition, which most people do, or he had those beliefs and he really thought he was benefiting humanity, and he really wasn't. He yoked up with some really bad people, you know, so.
Yeah, no. Yeah, I think I can agree with that. It's well said. And then now I'm trying. It's funny because this is, I believe it or not, it's actually been a bit since we did the Finders, because it was like re-recorded probably a few weeks prior to even coming out. Now getting into Carl Shapley, Now he like bankrolling something, or he was like financially tied to something. I forgot how I actually ever read his name in the first place. I know it was in a news article, and maybe in the
with
FBI
Shapley
documents.
it was when they nominated the news articles. They nominated the leaders of the Finders to take over for Marion Petty. That the Finders officially had done it, and Marion Petty officially done it. So Carl Shapley was on the list, and so was Hunter Adams, Hunter Adams from the movie Patch Adams. Okay, that was played by Robin Williams. I've done a lot of research into Patch Adams. Very sketchy, very, very sketchy.
Wow.
And I wrote a blog. And I've done video on Patch Adams' connections to the Finders too. Very, very, very sketchy stuff with the Good Son Tide Institute and the Finders pretty much giving him the money and the land to be able to build on. And that's a whole. I mean, we talk about it after we talk about with Shapley. But
Okay,
Shapley
yeah,
was mentioned as being a leader of the Finders after Petty, quote unquote, left the country, which he didn't, but he, at least at the time in the newspapers, was claiming that he was going to leave the country and not have anything to do with the Finders and stuff. And these were the leaders of the Finders. And you read articles of Carl Shapley talking very well of the Finders, within articles. So here we have in the Tampa Bay Times, talks about the Finders Operation members as generous, wonderful people who are very benevolent, that they perform a lot of practical jokes and poke fun at the majority. Carl states that members of the Finders Operation have got such weird press and that it needs to be turned around to who they really are. Carl continues, for instance, sometimes they may say the children are in charge today, that adults get down on their hands and knees and do what the children say. Carl also mentions that Marion Petty is referenced to the game caller. Carl continues further about Marion. He states, he is one of the eccentrics of our time, a total benevolent and benign man. He is like a character out of Alice in Wonderland. I think he could be the Mad Hatter sometimes. I think he could be the Rabbit sometimes, and sometimes the Red Queen. Now, remember, the Red Queen was not benevolent in Alice in Wonderland. She was evil and Alice's antagonist in the Lewis Carroll story. And he also says he kind of has a twinkle in his eye all the time. And then when Carl was asked about the reports of children on the Finders Operation Free State properties in Virginia being frequently heard screaming by neighbors, Carl states, anyone knows children knows that when they are delighted, they scream.
Oh yeah.
And so I've gone back and forth. I do believe the 6 children that were found in Tallahassee, they were children of the members of the Finders Operation. And there was a 7-child Walker that had not taken the trip with them, but stayed behind. He was an infant. I do believe that the children were psychologically abused and tortured. I do believe that they were mentally, like I said, mentally, psychologically. I do believe that they were neglected. I don't believe though that they were sexually abused. At least the evidence that we have, the statements that we have come from Dr. Samuel Moore, who's passed away. I can't, confirm anything that he has said, and I don't have the medical reports in front of me to read them to know exactly what was stated. We only have what was stated within the Tallahassee Police Department of that, Jordan Messina Rico, the oldest Finders Operation child, that she had half of a broken hymen, which necessarily doesn't happen from sexual assault. And John Paul Pope, I believe to be James Michael Hollowell III, Michael Hollowell's son, had a loose anal sphincter control. But as someone who's read about gut health, obviously coached people with gut health, the Finders kids' diet were atrocious. Okay, they fasted a lot. They were kind of fed a whole bunch of vegetables. Every now and then they might get treats from a babysitter job. So his digestive health was horrible. And so that could lead to a prolapse sphincter to some degree. Like, I don't know, was there anal tearing? I don't have the reports in front of me, so I can't read them. I can only go based off of what limited information that we have. And supposedly in a documentary that is coming out, Jordan Noriko had mentioned that she was not molested. And so, I can't make those claims. Do I believe there was human trafficking going on with the Finders and everything? Yeah, I do. And the occult was an operation. I'll call it more of an operation than a cult. the operation was very highly compartmentalized. So unless I say I know specifically that this person knows, or I know specifically that this person did this, okay, don't, like with any operation, don't assume that every single person involved with the operation knows every single thing that goes in the operation.
I think you're totally right with the
okay?
finders for sure. I think it was totally decompartmentalized. I think you're right.
So because of that, but I mean, there was, what was the finders member that in his elder years got charged and convicted with a child pornography. That would be a Theodore Gerald Reese. And so he got charged, and I think, let me bring it up real quick. Right here. Theodore Reese was sentenced on Wednesday, May 10th, 2017 to 90 months in prison at the age of 81 for the distribution of child pornography. Reese used a personal computer to distribute a peer-to-peer network and file containing a video of minors engaged in sexually explicit conduct. Additionally, during a search of Reese's home on September 9, 2015, investigators found Reese in possession of various electronic devices and CDs that were later found to contain 291 videos and 29 still images of child pornography. Now, Reese was a expert in computers, and I believe, I think he taught at a university. I'm having a trouble offhand to remember which one it is. I'll try to look it up. But when this information came out, or when the information came out that he was in the finders, they removed him from the faculty profile. But it is him. Like, I've done enough research to confirm that it is the same. Like, his wife is the same. That was in the finders. Like, it is. He was a finders member. He's in the investigative leads memo he's talked about in Toby Terrell's book, The Game Caller. He was within the inner circle, both him and his wife were. And it's, points out where they lived is in the same area that they were told that they were lived in during the finders, matches the same age as the guy that was talked about in the finders. So it's definitely him. So him, I can say, he is a pedophile. So, that's the, he's convicted for it, but everybody else, like I said, do I think that the children were neglected?
Oh, for
yes,
sure.
I do think that's a form of abuse. Do I think that there was mental manipulation and mind control going on? Well, I do. You can read about the didactic dramas where they used to put the kids in dark closets and leave them there for a short period of time, or even a long period of time, and then the adults would wear masks and scare the crap out of the kids and then laugh, and it's a whole joke, right? And then they have the books that Ramon J. Martinez found on mind control that was in the Finders Library, and so I'll write more about it in my book, obviously, but I do think that there was some sort of mental abuse. That they were not good parents. Now, for example, did Paula Rico parent her children better when she broke off to the Finders and started her own commune down there in Florida? Maybe, I don't know. Not all the Finders kids want to go on the record. There's one that I won't name that told me, I don't want to talk. I appreciate the work that you're doing, but I did not have a good childhood. So there's a lot of allegations out there in White Patriot, and I've only gone with what I could prove.
Yeah, I guess, really, it could also depend on the parents as well.
I don't know, man. When I make a statement, I want to be definitive that I can back it up, especially if I'm going to make a claim that this person is a pedophile, right? There's some... Maybe sometimes you might be a little bit more liberal calling some people certain things, but when I'm writing a book on this case and I'm trying to separate it all and I'm really, diving in and stuff like that, I don't, again, I don't think even Marion Petty, I don't think Marion Petty knew exactly almost everything that went on in the operation, but I'm sure he knew a good, dark, big chunk of it,
Yeah. You know what you mentioned before, and then we went into other stuff. I just do want to mention, and I remember this, and I might have even mentioned it on the Occult Rejects, or maybe not, maybe just in conversation off the air. But I do remember, I don't know if it was the exact same conversation or whatever you read off where this person was comparing him to, like, Alice in Wonderland.
Mm-hmm.
Now, you mentioned Lewis Carroll. Now, I also know that there was something I came across where somebody did mention, like, Alice in Wonderland and Lewis Carroll in the Finders. We were covering the Fellowship of Friends.
Mm-hmm.
That's another cult out in California. There was links to them, people that are underneath, like, the business aspect of of the Fellowship of Friends also linked to a Lewis Carroll school for kids. And I even thought that was a little weird because it was almost like one of those pods where it's like, you know, the kids, and it's not like regular school. It was one of those. So I thought it was weird, and I kind of thought it was a little weird. You know, Lewis Carroll, the rabbit hole, like, you know, can we make conspiracies? You know, whatever.
Yeah.
But now hearing both, it's just, I find that really interesting, actually. Two different cults and mention of Lewis Carroll.
Well, it seems to be like an MK Ultra theme.
Yeah,
you know, and
that's what I had
programming and
wondered too,
everything.
as well.
And I mean, you know, with Shapley, you know, Shapley really excuses the finders. Hunter Patch Adams really excused the finders, you know, and so it's like, okay, so did they really believe that the finders were completely benevolent? I mean, that's the two narratives, the two competing narratives, right? That the fighters were misaligned. They kind of meant well. They weren't malevolent, you know, or, you know, mostly everything I was written about them and then the, you know, the leaked Customs Department, you know, Ramon J. Martinez's allegations are true, you know, and you know, I think, you know, a majority of them I've been able to substantiate. I think Ramon J. Martinez was telling the truth, and I think he was ousted out of the Customs Department, harassed for the rest of his life because he did the right thing, tried to, and cost him his career. And you know, with Shapley, you know, he's just an odd dude. I mean,
now wasn't his family though also like very connected to NASA?
I don't know about NASA. I don't remember offhand, but I know that when he was a child, because his father was a professor at Harvard University, and when he was a child, he actually met Albert Einstein. I found a picture of when he was a child being with Albert Einstein.
Oh, that's right. It was his fault. Yeah. I found that too.
So that's weird, man. Like, that's weird. All right. So, you know, and his dad was another
weird. That was actually, sorry to interrupt you. That was another weird synchronicity that happened for me too, because I had a guest on covering Native Americans, and like we were covering how we thought some stuff was like actual, like kind of occultism, good or bad, I don't know, but it's like hidden science. And somebody, the person that we had on, was showing Albert Einstein with the Indians. And I saw him with whoever you're saying now, and I was like, "Yo, come on, this guy again."
Well, to pivot what you're saying though. I mean, Carl's father, Harlow Shapley.
That's what I'm looking at now.
Professor,
yeah, I was going to say that. Yeah.
He co-founded UNESCO.
And what is that for people who don't know what that is?
The United Nations Educational, Scientific, and Cultural Organization. So they could control a lot of archaeology.
Oh, that's really interesting.
The dig and the research that's published and everything. United Nations has UNESCO has a strong hand on that. They claim they're preserving cultures, which is complete bunk. But and so, you know, Carl Shapley's father, Harlow Shapley, he was the co-founder of UNESCO. He also wrote for the think tank, the Rand Corporation, for many years. His Carl's brother, I'm sorry, not his father. Carl's brother, Lloyd Shapley, he worked for the Rand Corporation for many years. Was also in the United States Army Air Corps, just like Marion Petty was, and worked for the Rand Corporation. And Carl, he is a self-proclaimed first-century Gnostic, like self-proclaimed. All right. He's also talked about what did he say? He's a noetic scientist, but he also discussed.
It's funny how he's very different considering all his family too, if you really think about it.
Yeah, he because he went more into the New Age theosophical side, right?
Yeah.
Which is, I mean, serves the elite in its own purposes. But Shapley,
Right.
he talks about talk with the Ascended Masters and Saint Germain and all that, and, you know, channeling and doing automatic writing. I found an interview where he was discussing that. And he formed his own New Age school, which was called the Shapley School. But the craziest thing, this is where the secret right, there's many secret right connections to the Finders. And I've written about them, but I haven't done a show on them specifically. Carl Shapley worked directly with the Unification Church and was a world peace ambassador for them.
Again, religion. Well, Well, we were talking about Weicker with religion. Now we got Shapley with religion.
Yeah, so now Shapley's running around for the Moonies, working for them as a world peace ambassador, you know, and Reverend Summa Moon was a heretic. I mean, he thought he was saying he was fulfilling, you know, Jesus's quote unquote failed mission. You know, he gave the money to among other people to fund and start the Council for National Policy. So, you know, I mean, again, I like that's one thing I've always came across, and I know you've come across too, and I know you've talked about it in White Patriot.
Mm-hmm. You know what I'm
the right that claims to be Christian, but constantly is always involved with New Age theosophical stuff.
Well,
man.
you know, and I'm not knocking. Really, I'm not knocking that. It's just really, unfortunately, people I think use that facade to pull shit over on people. Unfortunately.
Yeah. You know? But I mean, Shapley is very interesting, and again. I mean, I was amazed when I started digging it because no one really, you know, other than that article coming, you know, and George writing about him, like you would think someone would talk about him because just like all of his connections of his dad and like but no, I mean, that's why I was glad you guys talked about him because no one did.
Yeah, that's what I was actually really surprised about. I was like, I'm like, it's hard to believe that, like me, out of all people, like, wow. I'm looking now. This is where I was saying it ties to NASA. His brother Willis Shapley, he was an American civil servant, best known as the third-ranking administrator for NASA during the Apollo program.
Wow. Okay, I will give you credit for that because I did not know about the other brother.
Yeah, you know what's a good way to find out sometimes? I go look up their gravestones, and they have sites for gravestones, and then sometimes it will show their other family members.
You know, a lot of that data comes from the LDS, from the Mormon Church.
Yes, when we were covering Skinwalker Ranch, and I can't remember it was a few sites that I was using to, like, you get the whole family tree. You could start following the spider webs.
Yeah.
I had realized that I was looking on for Mormons, and I was just like so amazed by how much stuff I was finding.
Yeah, genealogy.
And then I found out, I'm like, well, it's owned by Mormons, and like I was covering Skinwalker Ranch, looking up Mormons. And I was like, yo.
And what were you using was owned by Mormons.
Yeah, I was like, come on. You know, it was just really wild. The Deseret News, I'm using links for that, for stuff with Skinwalker Ranch, and I'm like, they're owned by Mormons.
I mean, it really does get meta like that sometimes, you know? And hold on, let me see if I can find out Carl Shapley. So Carl Shapley, okay, so here it was. It was Marion Petty petitions Carl Shapley becomes co-leader of the Finders after 1987. So it goes, an unsigned one-page memo supposedly from Marion Petty was hand-delivered on February 18th, 1987 to Tallahassee Democrat. The memo discussed as follows. 1, I didn't know I was the leader of the Finders. 2, I thought I was just a consultant on wit and humor. 3, if I ever was a leader, I hereby resign to devote myself to Zen walking, and I recommend that the Finders hold an election as soon as possible to elect Dr. Hunter Adams, which is Patch Adams, Stephen A. Weitzman Esquire, and Dr. Carl Shapley as co-leader of the Finders, okay? And about Goatgate, Carl Shapley says, it's simply like a farm. Any farm, they slaughter animals. The fact they made a game out of it, I thought it was in poor taste. That's being picked up by the police that it's something satanic. That's not the case. It's rather it is poor taste, but it's not cultish. And Hunter Adams, when asked about the execution of Henrietta Igor, because that's what the photo album said of the pictures of the ritual sacrifice of the goat. Okay, it was called on the title, the front title of the album was called The Execution of Henrietta and Igor. All right, Hunter Patch Adams, I'm paraphrasing, says, "Oh, it's just adults teaching kids. It's just animal husbandry. You know, if your father was a butcher." You know, he would teach you the same way. You know, when you're 2 or 3 years old, he would give you goat fetuses or the head of a goat, and you'd have it on a silver platter while everybody's wearing white robes. You know, white robes when you slaughter a goat. I mean, really? You know, so I mean,
I forgot all about that.
It sounds occult to me.
Too. Yeah, I forgot about that stuff that they had. Didn't they have like pictures and stuff of that going on?
Yeah, supposedly? It was in the photo album that they found the execution of Henrietta and Igor.
Ooh.
I mean, kids as young as 2 or 3 there when they're butchering a male and female goat, and the female goat's pregnant, and they're ripping the fetuses out.
That's wrong.
There's a picture of a kid holding a goat's head on a silver platter.
That's some next
And
level.
it's just animal husbandry. Any butcher family would do that, right? Any farm family would do that, right?
Yeah,
In my
yeah.
Patriot, this is normal.
I guess so. I'm glad I'm not on a farm.
You're not
I'm
used
good
to
on
the
that.
farm life.
Yeah, I'm good on that one. Damn. Oh, it was another thing I actually wanted to ask you because I figured if you knew this, you'd know it more than me because it was something I did want to look into. It's just, the series was already time consuming with what I was going into. I did seem to be in the documents a couple of times mentioned like the intimidation done to people who wanted to leave. Did you ever look into that anymore? And I think there might have even been people who were killed. I don't know if you looked into that stuff.
Yeah, I mean, some of it I could talk about.
Okay, yeah, whatever you can.
It was reported that one of the previous Finders members who was dating one of the Finders women, his name was John Cox, and he was a Sufi businessman, supposedly. And George has written about him and found some information. And we don't know if it's the same John Cox or not. And I've, looked into him too. But he kind of got upset at the Finders operation, and we quite really don't know why. And so he was bullied and harassed and threatened. There was a famous feminist researcher. She's a libertarian. I can't think of her name offhand right now. I have a signed letter that Marion Petty wrote, but under one of the Finders operation members, quote unquote, Chinese girlfriend or wife, threatening her, saying, "You're a frumpy bitch. I'll push you down the stairs the next time I see you."
Damn. So
is that the Queen of Hearts stuff that Shapley was talking about? And Alice in Wonderland's got a little bit of Queen of Hearts in them, So I mean, the researcher, libertarian researcher, I think her first name was Carol. I'm sorry, I can't remember it offhand. But she was a famous feminist libertarian parapolitical researcher. But yeah, she was investigating the Finders, and she got that warning. Let me see if I can actually keep talking for a minute. Let's see if I can find it. But there was a lawyer talking about when they were just the lawyers in the newspaper articles, and I actually found some newspaper articles about the trial where the Finders sued Marion Petty to try to get some money back to other Finders members in the mid 1990s. And there's articles in there, and you can tell it's John Cox's lawyer. All right, and he's like, yeah, the death threats, and I'm like, and I found the guy, and I've tried to contact the lawyer. I found the lawyer. He still practices in the Culpeper area, and I haven't been able to make that connection yet. But
I never even thought of that, trying to contact the lawyers and stuff like that.
Because I wanted to ask him, I was like, so what threats do we have here, sir? Like, what are we talking about? Can you tell me anything? Can you go on the record on anything without breaking, I know it's been a long time since you've represented Mr. Cox, but is there anything you can tell me off the record, on the record?
There was even another thing I noticed in the FBI documents that it did mention, and it was like a little bit detailed, but then I don't think like it went anywhere else. Do you remember like somebody who I think found a computer and ended up like bringing it to the police and it like owned?
Yes, they found it at the Tallahassee,
like at a phone booth or some shit, right?
University of Tallahassee. They found it in the phone book. Yes, it was a T80 computer, I think. I'd have to look that up. But yes, they found it and they turned it in to the cops. The researcher's name was Carol Moore.
Okay.
And the letter goes, "Watch you step, you frumpy bitch." Signed, My Lee.
Damn. Frumpy bitch. Oh, nice. Wow.
So, yeah, sent to the Chinese wife of one of the Finders men, trying to act like, it's Marion
you mentioned Chinese again, and I totally forgot. What do you think was up with them and the connection supposedly to the Chinese embassy or China?
Well, okay, so there was a guy that was mentioned in the investigative leads memo that I've been researching, and I need to do more research on him. Let me bring up the investigative leads memo. I can't remember his name offhand, but he was a a talent scouter for, well, I call him a talent scouter, but he was a recruitment for Georgetown University. And he was feeding the finders a lot of Chinese students. But he was mentioned in the investigative leads memo, which I want to read the specific part that was in the investigative leads memo about him. His name was Eric Heiberg. So in 1954, Petty recruited Eric Heiberg, who lost his NSA clearance at about this time. Heiberg was redeployed as a private investigator and specifically as a talent spotter, which I've confirmed he worked for Georgetown University as a kind of like a counselor, trying to get people into the school, right? So gotcha. Talent spotter, recruiter. Okay.
See how that would work.
At Georgetown University, his current position. And so, he was bringing in various people, a lot of Chinese, a lot of Russian people into the finders.
Even the Fellowship of Friends that I mentioned before, they were real big with bringing Russians over.
So the finders, there's a lot of Russian connections too, as well.
Interesting.
That I'll talk more about once I flesh that out in my book. I'm actually going to talk about Eric Heiberg. Actually, I probably need to add him to chapter 2 as people that knew the finders. I probably need to actually go back and add him because there's been an investigative journalist who I won't name who's been helping me. And he actually gave me a lot of information on Heiberg that he was investigating the finders back in the 1990s. He was like, go check out this guy. And I was like, okay. And then I was like, oh, he's in the investigative memo. And I started looking into him. I was like, oh yes, he really was associated with the finders, and then, and so, I mean, there's been stuff that I've been told that I can't corroborate. Like I was told from someone within the United States Customs Department that there were serial killers of priests in the Kentucky, Tennessee area that was linked to the finders that they could never substantiate.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, that's bugged out.
I can't substantiate either because the investigator that they were working with, I tried to track him down. I couldn't find him.
That's some creepy shit to even think about. Damn.
So, I'm not going to write about that because I can't corroborate it, but something I was looking into.
I've often wondered sometimes if serial killers are like cults going wrong for somebody. I hate to say it.
Well, there is the Hand of Death cult,
What's that?
So,
I've actually never heard of that.
They were kind of like supposedly another name for, I think it was Henry Lee Lucas talked about the Hand of Death. And so, because he was a serial killer, so I think he discussed about it in prison, if I remember correctly. And I think Dave McGowan wrote a lot about it, and George has talked about it too. And then they were kind of like a collective government group that was running the serial killers. Berkowitz kind of talked about a collective Satanist government group that was running serial killers too. Yes. So that's pretty much them talking about the same thing.
Oh, okay. All right. Yeah.
Now, I found a book that disappeared completely off the internet. I cannot find it. Me and George have looked. We have spent hours upon hours upon hours in My Patriot looking. That said that the Hunt brothers, the Hunt family, who helped found this Council for National Policy, a big part of John Birch Society, may have contributed to the assassination of JFK or the killing during the ritual. The King killed 33 ritual is what I believe. But they financed the Hand of Death cult.
Oh, wow.
It was really their elite assassins.
Damn. Some wild stuff. If that's,
Josh Reeves used to talk about it, that he had found it in a book. And then I found it, but did not screenshot the book. And then I was like, probably. It's like one time I can't find it, man. One time, and I do my best to try to keep everything, but sometimes you're looking and you miss stuff. Yeah. One time I found a description on Roy Cohn's yacht that was in a book of a blonde young gentleman that sounded exactly like Donald Trump. And I went back to try to find that book. I could never find it again.
Of course.
And I was like, but then again, like, no one could find this Maximum Golf article, and I had to put alert on eBay for any Maximum Golf, articles or any Maximum Golf like books that came up, for it, because people were quoting the article about Epstein in there and Trump, but no one actually had read the article or anything like that. And sure enough, it came up in a lot of golf magazine books for like, I don't know, like, I think I paid like $22 for the lot or whatever. But yeah, it was really the full article of Trump and Epstein, and the girl that was made to look younger, that the writer of the article right here says Trump jetting and betting with the Donald. And Epstein's mentioned in there, and they flew on Trump's plane, on Epstein's plane. Because remember, people are always like, well, there's only 1 or 2 times that Trump flew on Epstein plane. Well, first of all, that's that we know of. I think it's up to 6 or 7 now, I think, if I remember correctly.
That's true. All these people
Trump
do
had
have
his own plane.
A lot of the people probably that's been on his plane had their own. So, like, how do you know? Like, that's not the only time they've ever, maybe they used their car this time. You know what I'm saying? You think about it like that.
Yeah.
I'll come pick you up this time. Like, why is it always Epstein's plane? That's a really good point. How many times do you think maybe Epstein's been on fucking Trump's? 20.
Exactly. And we don't know. So we know in this article at least once, because this article states that he flew on his plane.
That's awesome.
But a lot of stuff disappears. I mean, it's just memory hold. Yeah. And the finders, I mean, I've tried to, I found the full investigative leads memo, that was given to me by, someone who I admire very much. And, they had a copy of the full thing, and I published the full thing. We only had the write-up of it. We never had the complete investigative leads memo. It's for free on my Substack. It gives some more links at the end of who the finders were connected to that wasn't previously known. Because there's a whole list of people that they were involved with. One of them being the Jesuit, quote unquote, priest Ivan Illich, who ran his own Mexican school and may have been the school that they were going to. And I also have documents, I have telexes from the finders that discuss the meeting with Ivan Illich. And so, I was able to prove that. And Ivan Illich
is that who they were supposed to be meeting for this school for gifted children?
That is the rumor, but we don't know.
That's the rumor. Now, is it true that even when I think they got multiple stories or like different answers from different people about what they were doing too, right?
That's true, yes. I mean, for all we know, we don't even know there was a school, but the school's supposed to be Ivan Illich's school, or whatever he was running down there in Mexico. Mm-hmm. But we don't even know if that was really where they were going. We really don't.
Yeah.
Because maybe that could have been where they were told that if they ever got busted, for them to tell where they were going.
Very well said.
Just like they had the car with the Miranda rights, right? And
yeah, right.
The feigning.
The feigning. I had even said to Lux, I was like, for all you know, like every certain amount of hours, they had to call somebody and just let them know, like, yeah, we're okay. And if we don't hear from them in a certain amount of time, we just assume they're busted and. Let's go to the warehouse. Let's clean this shit up. Let's clean that shit up before the cops start showing up.
I do have on file from Ramon J. Martinez's partner, Bob Harold, this is on the record, that the night before the raid of the warehouse, the surrounding warehouses, there was a warehouse that was run by the Chinese that told them, and this was in his report. Now, his report was once on Usenet. It was once on the bulletin boards. Bob Harold, he opened up a computer business when he left the Customs Department. What he was doing for Customs was computers. He's very literate in computers. He knew about computers. Okay. He told me that that they were tipped off. They took the 2 finders' vans before the raid, filled it up with boxes, okay, of papers, computer equipment, because they were running the CIA training operation for people on computers, future enterprises. They're running it out of the warehouse. So they slam filled those vans up and drove them away. And there was a second report. There was Bob Harold's Customs investigative report that used to be on the internet. And we spent hours looking for his report that could corroborate Ramon J. Martinez's report. We couldn't find it. Oh. It completely been scrubbed. He told me that when he went to the desks, there were all these desks in this one room and papers scattered everywhere and everything. And he looked at the desks and he realized that the desks haven't been cleaned. They were dusty. And it had the outline of what, computer monitors and stuff like that. There was so many of them like in this room with all these desks, because that's where they were training the CIA agents on computers, and that's not previously known. So.
Yeah, I honestly think that they were. I think even in the FBI documents, somebody even said that they were suspecting that there might have been tip-offs prior to the police raiding the place. I can't remember.
There was.
Yeah.
There was.
I think so.
Um,
And that was
I mean,
was another thing that made me even mention the Chinese embassy, and I did also mean to throw in there was like people who I think were going to that warehouse, went next door to the wrong place, and I think there was supposedly people saying that they were going to the Chinese embassy or a youth hostel, but it was really the warehouse that the finders had.
I'm trying. So it was
like,
in the apartments, I think, the W Street apartments. I'm trying.
That was
to
another
find...
weird thing too. So like they had that. So did they have a CIA operation going on in the warehouse, and then they're like renting out rooms to like whoever came off the streets?
Yeah. Petty had owned that since the 20s and the 30s as a flop house for like OSS people to go to. I think it was the 30s. I think it was the 30s is when he got it. The W Street
Really, it
apartments.
was for the OSS.
Yeah, that he wrote about it. He said that literally in an interview with Lynn Bracken and Ken Thomas. He said that during the. I'll get his exact quote up in a minute if you want me to. But
Oh, that's wild.
I just want to say that there was a Chinese resident found who was a graduate student in anatomy at Georgetown University during the W Street apartment raid, and that was a guy whose name was Jinxing Wang. And his name was discovered in a telex that was found in the raid. Because they got him, they know who he was. He's like, I'm a graduate student from Georgetown University. And they're like, okay, who are you? And then later they found his name on the telex. His name was Jinxing Wang. So
That's weird.
I mean, Petty had stamps in his passport. That was in the leaked I got the full Washington DC kind of like memo. I have the full one. They on the documents that were released, they had part of it blanked out, but I actually got hold of the real one. In the real one, they talk about that Marion Petty had stamps on his passport during the 50s, 60s, 70s, and 80s to Vietnam, North Korea, and USSR. Now, how in the world, during the height of the Cold War,
I was just thinking that. I was like, oh, that's a lot of weird countries to go to. Like if you start thinking back then.
Yeah,
like,
and the fighters talk about.
Like, are you a communist?
Yeah, I mean, the fighters talk about before 1987 of going to China, of going to USSR. Toby Terrell does. And we know that Hunter Patch Adams, his clowning, he set up like kind of like this clowning therapeutic like university thing, conferences and stuff. The first one was in Russia. That was done during the 80s. So, I don't know, man. I mean, unless you're a spook, how the heck do you go to North Korea in 1960? All right.
Yeah, no, that's what I'm saying. I mean, as you started reading them, I was like, wait, these are all like, I would think would be scary or risky countries to go to back then. Or even the fact is like, I might be okay there, but like, when I want to leave, are they going to allow me?
But I don't think you can even get in there. I mean,
right?
I mean, were they even allowing tourists to North Korea? You know, during that time period, like, especially, I mean, definitely during the Korean War. How's he gonna, like, what's he doing after the Korean War, and how's he gonna get to North Korea after the Korean War? After it being, I didn't think after the war that they. I mean, even now they allow visitors, but it's very difficult, especially from the United States, right? Like you have to follow certain rules and stuff to be able to be, and it's controlled. You ever watch the North Korean videos of people going to North Korea? Like I watch some crazy stuff on YouTube at night. I'm probably sure we all do, But the videos of people visiting North Korea and they're smuggling in cameras and taking videos of it. And I know there's something like a CIA puppet state kind of thing, North Korea, right? But like it's interesting, man. I mean, it's how do Marion Petty how do the finders just go to places like that? Like Marion Petty, I know you can do this. Like if you're previously in the Air Force, you can, one of your privileges is you can take you can go to an Air Force base and be like, okay, where's this plane going? Is this plane filled? And they'd be like, no, and you can do that. Like at first I thought I was like, no, but that research I found, yeah, you can't actually do that. Because at first I was like, okay, so he's out of the military, the U.S. Army Air Corps, right? But he's like taking all these military flights to places and stuff, and I'm like, you can't do that, But I realized actually no, you actually can do that. But still, but him going to North Korea and USSR during the Cold War and Vietnam, it's like, because they looked at his passport and they had all these stamps, all these different countries, right? And it's like, China, that's weird. So I mean, what is the Washington Metropolitan Police Department supposed to think, right? And John Stitcher was really trying. I mean, in Toby's book, we have Stitcher. I think Bradley was in on it, or didn't care. I think he was in on it though, but Stitcher wasn't. Stitcher died of a heart attack not too long afterwards. Okay. But in the book, Toby writes that Stitcher's like losing his mind or he's out of control or something, but he's yelling to Toby. And Toby was with one of their FBI handlers, Athena Veronius, who they based Clarice Starling on from Silence of the Lambs. They based that figure, literary figure, Thomas Harris did in the movie too, from her. So she's sitting there, and Detective Jim Bradley's with John Stitcher. They're both partners. And Stitcher's like blue in the face, yelling at Toby Terrell. He's like, "I got you dead to rights. I know you're shooting child pornography in the warehouse." Just righteous anger, just pissed. And Toby's just laughing at him. In the book, it's like, "Oh, this is just so silly. How did they come up with these allegations?" And then Athena Veronius on the way out, I'm going to get exactly what she said because I don't want to misquote her because at least according to the book, because I'm afraid that she might try to sue me. But let me find that quote. Let me pull that up real quick in the book. But it's, I mean, it was a cover up.
You really got me interested into this Patch Adams stuff now too.
Okay, we'll talk about the Patch Adams stuff next if you want to.
yeah. I don't know. I was even wondering if that's just another whole episode too, to go into Patch Adams stuff.
The Patch Adams stuff it blew my mind.
I didn't know that. You're even saying that you think the story or whatever goes back to.
What was crazy is do you know America's Frontline Doctors that's started by the Council for National Policy, and Simone Gold is like their head or stuff like that. Okay, so on one of the Clay Clark Week and Awaken America tours, one of the American Frontline Doctors came up and she goes, "You want to know how I got into medicine?" And I think the woman's genuine. I have no qualms against her, okay? She goes, "I met Hunter Patch Adams when I was a child, and my family was very much friends with him and grew up with him and worked at the Gesundheit Institute." And I was like, this is 1 degree separation from the fighters, I'm like, what is going on here, So imagine, I'm just listening, because I'm listening to the speakers at the We Awaken America tour, and I'm like, okay, so what is this person saying? What is this person saying? I get to her, and that's first 2 minutes, that's what she opens up with.
You must have been like, "Yo, wait, what?"
Yeah, I was driving my car. I was like, "What?" Like my mind was blown. I was like, "What the heck is going on here?" And then it's it's stuff like that, man. You live for those moments, but at the same time, you get a little sketched out a little bit. And you're like, it's fun solving the puzzle, right? It's fun, putting the Rubik's Cube in place. You get the dopamine hits from it. But sometimes you get a little of the chills when you put something in place too, and you're like, I don't know if I'm supposed to know this, I
know exactly what you mean. Yeah, you almost feel like you're creeped out that you, even came across it.
So let me see. I think in Toby's book, I think he calls Stitcher something else. In his book, some of the names, he changed the names of them. And some of them I can tell that's who he's talking about because I'm just so familiar with the case, So I'm like, okay, so I know he's talking about this person here. Let me see, because I want to get her exact quote. The goddess intervenes. He calls Athenia Veronius the goddess. Okay, so I learned years later she's the FBI agent for whom the character Clarice Starling is based on the Silence of the Lamb movie. I have confirmed that in newspaper reports. That is true. Nice. She actually runs a paranormal investigation business, or she did, in Winston-Salem, North Carolina, not too far from me. So I want to let's see here. You got any questions or anything while I look this up?
No, I was actually looking up Hunter. I was looking up what he looks like and everything.
Dr. Zany Ramorsky, that's what he calls himself.
I didn't know he was, damn. This person's still alive, right?
He is, yes.
Oh, shit. He outlived the guy who played him on TV. That's fucked up.
Yeah.
What the fuck? I figured this guy was, like, dead a long time ago. The Gesundheit Institute? I have to look into this, dude. Yo, he looks wild. All right, yeah, unfortunately, I can't. I'm not going to pull it up for the people to look at, but very interesting character to even, might have to look into this guy.
Oh, she goes, I read your letter. It's just what I thought it was, a slow day for the press. This is Athenia Veronius talking, okay? She goes, this is her talking to Robert Gardner Terrell Jr., Toby Terrell. They have to fill up the newspaper and the TV time. It's got picked up by news services and has stuck a sensitive chord with the public. Do you have a lawyer? Toby says no. She goes, you should think about getting one. It will get worse before it gets better. Can you call me tomorrow? I won't be able to tell you what I'm doing, but we will be working behind the scenes to put a lid on this thing.
Oh.
Now, Athena, if you ever hear this, I didn't say that. Toby said you said that. So, what am I supposed to say, NY Patriot? What am I supposed to say?
Yeah.
Sounds like to me a cover-up.
Well,
she was an FBI agent, so...
I mean, even going by the FBI documents, I mean, even this being on YouTube, I mean, you can't deny they say it themselves. It was closed because of CIA involvement. I mean, that's not even conspiratorial. They even say that.
Now, I will tell you.
No, I guess depending on what you think the CIA was doing.
No, I would tell you this. I would suggest not keeping this up on YouTube, but if you got any other platforms to keep it on, because this was one of the reasons why my channel got taken down.
Oh, okay.
Any video about the Finders will be marked as cyber stalking, harassment, and bullying, and there are people going around flagging videos talking about the Finders to do so.
Oh, okay. All right, maybe I'll drop this one.
That's one of the reasons why I lost my channel.
All right, I may only keep this up for a day or two. Sorry, but
I would.
Yeah, okay, all right, if you don't mind.
In your previous Finders videos, I hate to say it, but I would move them off platform too. Because
I've actually thought about that because it seems like the only things I've ever had problems with strikes is either mentioning fucking COVID, you're getting into that, or getting into things associated with kids.
Yeah,
and the problem is with that is because I think, and I do it myself. We start saying things that sound like fact without knowing the facts.
Yeah, but they're too, like, And
then I think they also just don't want you talking about stuff that's true.
Well, they took down my channel. I had no strikes. They took it down for, I quote, threats of violence.
That's how they knocked us off once. Our first strike was threats of violence because of ping pong. Us covering that.
Well, Elefantis goes and strikes any video.
So yeah, but we didn't even get like a strike. That was just like, oh, your thing's totally down just from that, just from one show. And then they did do it one other time with something that involved like cult stuff. And then the last one, they screwed us. We covered the Kabbalah and said that there was acts of violence or something being promoted in it. I was like, what? I was like, whatever. And that canceled us. No strikes this time, knock on wood. But if you're telling me not to leave this up, I won't. So,
no, I wouldn't leave this up.
All right, so when it comes out in a few days, you understand.
Oh, 100% understand.
This will drop on BitChute when it comes out on podcast.
So Hunter Doherty, Patch Adams, he's a character. He's something else. So, of course, most people watch the video, the movie Patch Adams with Robin Williams. It's loosely based off his life, but it's not really true. And so when you look into it, it was actually one of his closest male friends that was murdered by a patient. It's different from the movie. But so a couple of things. The inner circle of the Finders, and there might have been an inner circle inside that inner circle, but the inner circle of the Finders, Charles Sokol calls them the crazies, okay? And I think that's accurate from what I could tell, okay? And so the circle around that on the outer side was called the Zanies. And that comes from Hunter Patch Adams' name being Dr. Zany Ramorsky. Okay, so the fighters in the Zanies were very close. They were like, there's no separation. Like they were like very close together. Okay, like they had parties together. They hung out together. Toby Terrell writes in his book about a party that they had. You know, like they were tight. Okay, like so so here we go. Fires Operation member Toby Terrell in his book The Game Caller stated that Marion Petty received a phone call from Hunter Adams that he wants money or land to start the Gesundheit Institute. Toby also writes that Marion and Hunter have had frequent discussions over funding Hunter's enterprises. Toby claimed that Hunter is determined, and Hunter says to Marion that he has no shame and that he'd beg if he had to. Marion tells Hunter to fly out to Los Angeles, where the members of the Fires Operation were living at the time, which he does. They meet Hunter at the airport and then have a gourmet picnic at Griffith Park Observatory. Very interesting. Marion and Hunter have a long meeting, and Toby says the Fires Operation give him a deed to the mineral rights to some of the land they own in Neathers, Virginia. Okay. So then we find out that, that Hunter Patch Adams was elected co-president with Carl Shapley, right? In the memo. Okay. And so, like I mentioned earlier, Hunter Adams writes about Goatgate is he goes, what other evidence have they uncovered? Ritual bloodletting of the goat slaughter, Patch added. On the farm, it's called harvest. It's animal husbandry, a practice 13,000 years old, NY Patriot. Farmers traditionally include their children, particularly their male children, in the annual fall butchering of the livestock. Met city people who think milk comes from a carton. Urbanites are often ignorant of the realities of food production. Their way of child rearing isn't mine. Yes, they're strange. Yes, maybe they're misguided. But there are a lot of other kinds of neglect out there. If their children have been neglected, it wasn't meant to be neglect. They mean to give their children enriching experiences. This could be a lesson of survival. If you want to show our society is messed up, this will certainly do it. Thoughts?
I don't know. This I don't know why, but I'm just like so interested in this Patch Adams thing now. I don't know if it's because like even things like I just think that Robin Williams has played just like Tom Hanks. I think they have had very specific occult movies that they've played in.
I mean, look at Peter Pan.
Yeah, and it's just like not knocking. Who knows if they're being used? Whoever. I'm not saying anything about Robin Williams. I just think that's very interesting. Then another person I think like Tom Cruise, who has been in occult movies that people would have. Now, Tom Hanks too. People that they're all good examples. People who are in movies that you would never visually think because of the way it looks could be touching on occultism.
Yeah,
but I think actually is, and I do think Robin Williams is one of those actors, honestly, and the fact that he played Patch Adams is what's blowing my mind too.
And Hunter Patch Adams, was a big part of the Finders.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. So I'm like, yo, come on.
Imagine when I was doing this research.
I've honestly wondered, and like, real quick, do they like know this stuff? Like, do they know stories that will just never be told to us? And we're like, oh, we'll make like a loosely based movie off of it because people will never know this is really going on.
That's true. Yeah.
I've wondered. It's like stuff like this makes me think that, man.
I mean, okay, so when I got into the Finders.
Like, we'll do a movie about this guy, but they'll never know what he was really associated with or really. It's just really wild.
I mean, this was, okay, so what actually made me investigate it, okay, other than the tangential research, when I very first started, what made me actually look at it was when I found the article, Carl Shapley and Hunter Adams. And that article was what made me start researching this so many years ago. Because I said, Hunter Adams. Patch Adams? Because I remember watching the movie. I remember the movie, they played the movie in school all the time when we were growing up. So I remember seeing the movie a dozen million times, and watching the movie and actually thinking it was okay. It was kind of goofy, but it was fine, And then I looked it up and I said, wow, that really is Hunter Patch Adams from the movie, And then so that actually started me investigating it.
That's wild, man. That's a great point. This is very interesting to me. I have to definitely start maybe just diving into that myself as well.
And here we go too. Something else. The The Finders operation took frequent trips to the Soviet Union even during the 1980s. Hunter still leads trips to cheer kids up all over the world. In 1985, Hunter Adams organized the Gesundheit Institute's first international humanitarian clown trip to Soviet Union. Gesundheit Institute clowns have returned each year to Russia, supposedly developing the basic methodology of therapeutic clowning with the Russians.
Why you see again another? Like I said, even with the Fellowship of Friends, and then now this cult, it just seems like a lot. I just find this Russia connection between cults like really weird. You know, like
That's
even
crazy,
with
huh?
the Fellowship of Friends, like they were bringing dudes over who were basically like, willing to have sex with the cult leader to get a green card. I mean, like this is like it was just weird, very weird. I think they even have like a lot of, you know, with the Fellowship of Friends, they had this whole amphitheater outside for the cult, and they have like a lot of musicians coming and playing there, and like a lot of them are even coming from there too. It's just like, what's up with the connection to Russia and cults?
Yeah.
It's just weird. Not saying that, you know, Russia may even have anything to do with itself. Maybe they just found a good spot to, I don't know, conduct business. Who knows? Very weird. Is there anything else? I'm probably going to wrap it up here. If there's anything else, though, that you would like to mention yourself for the Finders that you think is important, without going down like, you know, a hole of the rabbit hole in itself, because I can definitely have you back on again to cover more stuff.
Yeah, we can talk about it again too, and you know you can go research stuff.
Yeah, no, I'm thinking of doing that and coming back with you maybe in a month or so and just throw some more notes together.
That sounds good to me.
I think that would be fun, actually.
I'm trying to think if there's anything else.
I think if I even went through some of the stuff that I have, because there was stuff, I don't know how you are, but like sometimes you'll start like minusing little things because you're like, I don't want to draw this out or drag this out. Like I do sometimes that with like the Occult Rejects. And then it's like after the fact, I'll be like, damn, like I'll find out something new and I'll be like, I should have put all that in. So this extra stuff that I have in my notes that I'm sure would probably really help add to it that I never used, unfortunately. Yeah, I don't know if that ever happens to you when you look.
Well, I have so many notes too as well that probably would never be used. That maybe they're benefit to someone else. But
yeah,
I'm trying to think if there's anything else. I mean, next time we'll talk about Barbara Marx Hubbard.
Okay, all right.
And her connections to the Finders and the World Future Society and transhumanism.
All right.
I think that's a pretty big thing. It gets a pretty big section of my book, like almost like 20 pages just on her alone and the Finders and everything.
All right,
so
awesome.
We'll probably talk about that, I would assume.
Yeah, all right. Well, I mean, we talked about a lot here. I think actually within an hour, I think we crammed in a lot of stuff. So.
Yeah, I do want to thank your and Lux's research on the Finders because you guys gave me some leads that I didn't know about. And the thing is, not everybody can know everything.
Probably wouldn't have continued looking into some of this stuff if it wasn't that I found you even mentioned some of their names. Because because sometimes like for me, like some things, it's like I almost want to at least find something else almost. So I know like maybe I'm not crazy. Maybe somebody else has thought of this before, and like I found you and George and I was like, okay, somebody else has mentioned Carl Shapley and I think, even Weicker or whatever. And I was like, all right, I'm not like, grasping at straws here when thinking these people are involved. So
they're not.
Yeah,
they're not.
No, so thank you for all your work done as well.
They're deeply involved.
Yeah, no, that's what I thought too. And to tell you the truth, we were already 2 or 3 shows in when I found that stuff. So like that, it was even something I skimped myself because I was like, is this going to turn into 5-6 episodes now? So thank you for coming on and even.
Thank you very much, NY Patriot. It's been a pleasure. I guess one last thing is you can look into Mankind Research Unlimited. I think you might like that avenue, and Carl Schleichler. And the Curlian photography and their connections to the Finders. You might be able to dig up something that maybe I missed with that. So
that sounds fun. Then.
That might be another avenue. But thank you for having me on. Take care, everybody.
Man. Thank you. And yeah, thank you everybody who jumped in. Oh, damn, he left already. Damn. Okay. I guess I don't even have to worry about plugging his show. But yeah, that was We've Read the Documents. Go check him out. He's got his links in the bottom. My links are in the bottom. The new Twitter's links in the bottom. The Element link definitely check out the Element server. Before, we're doing watch parties, Twin Peaks watch parties that we are trying to do every Friday or so. And I think when that's over, we might move on to other things as well. So check that out. We do try to do things as a group. We got multiple shows in there, multiple channels for tons of different things to talk about. So check out the Element server. And yeah, that is it. Thank you all. Thank Bad Goy. Thank Helen. Thank you, PK, and everybody else who jumped into the live. I know I kind of went at like a weird time, and I normally don't do that well with people jumping in or people being able to check out the show, but a decent amount of you did. So thank you. That is what's up. That's why I try to do it. And until the next one, everybody be well. Later.